Intergovernmental Relations and Public Transportation Committee for Tuesday, March 19th, 2019 is called to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Here. Mr. Schrein. Mr. Schrein is absent. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Any public comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, Ms. Liu.
Good afternoon. I'm here to restate my support to our county ordinance for Inspector General. This is an important office for our county to get out of the shadows of the past and get into a bright future. However, also in this committee, we now can talk about public transportations. Recently, we just had a couple of interesting meetings at RTA headquarters, and we have learned finally all the pillar studies are on their way. The first one actually showing the important result was the economic impact studies. However, in this presentation, we learned RTA's operation and service has been cut and changed to a degree that our jobs are on the opposite direction to where the people live. And this is the reason why transportation lines are actually our lifelines. If we want the whole county to really grow, especially economically, there are lots of obstacles. However, they also have a study for system redesign, and another study is for their fare structures. We don't know how those will come out yet. It seems like the board members of RTA finally woke up and they really pay attention to find the right people to do these jobs. However, from all the slacking accumulated from the past, we really have a lot to catch up. So I will urge this committee paying attention and please also trying to find out if we can have another session spending more time on our public transportation, because this is tied to lots of important things our county needs to improve everybody's life. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 15th, 2019?
So move.
Any comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. All right, at this time, we were going to enter a substitute ordinance, but it's been brought to my attention here in the last half hour that there are a few items that they would like to, if tweak is the right word, to make sure that it's in good order so that when we do pass it, we are satisfied with as it's written. And Mike King has agreed to kind of give us just a bit of an overview of why it is that we're going to hold this for 2 weeks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for the...
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Excuse me, Mike. Do you want me to read the ordinance into the record?
I'm sorry to say yes, go right ahead.
Ordinance number 2018-0013, amending section 204.01 of the County Code to require county agencies to provide a response to recommendations issued as part of an investigation of the Agency of Inspector General and to update the County Code in accordance with the adoption of Article 15 of the County Charter.
Go right ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for the committee's awareness, we are following discussion with the chairwoman and sponsor that this legislation be held. The law department recently brought to our attention a couple of issues that they're proposing some recommendations to address. Just to give you an idea of what those relate to. In particular, it's about updating the ordinance to be more consistent with what was adopted in the charter, with the amendment that was voted last year relating to the budget. And then the other issue is in the proposed substitute. It principally deals with how the executive and departments under the executive respond to recommendations from the Inspector General, but it doesn't address how non-executive agencies will be governed. So There are a lot of independent boards, commissions, and other offices out there that are under the jurisdiction of the Inspector General that theoretically would also be required to respond, but this only deals with the county executive or designee. So we're going to sit down with them in the next couple weeks and try and come up with some proposed language that will satisfy that issue as well. So, and then there are a couple other small issues that we may have to bring before you, but we'll sit down with them and bring them to you in a couple weeks when the next committee is held.
Good. And I would ask if any members have any questions between now and 2 weeks from now when they received, because I will certainly make sure you get forwarded what changes are made. Please let us know so that we can be prepared in putting this together, and hopefully we will be back in 2 weeks from now to put a substitute bill in front of you that we can all know is in good order. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so today we have on the schedule a presentation from our Inspector General, Mark Griffin, and he is going to give us his semi-annual report. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of council, Mark Griffin on behalf of the agency Inspector General. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share with you the activities. I want to thank with you the opportunity to share with you the activities of my office over the last 6 months of 2018. We had a number of new initiatives and then continuing some old programs, and so I want to briefly give an overview of those and then leave as much time as possible for questions about what we've done and where we intend to go in the past. So during the second half of 2018, we worked significantly to assist law enforcement with respect to and collaborate with their inspections regarding public corruption investigations, as well as a review of the jail matters as well, to try to work with them and to provide as much assistance as we can. In terms of our investigations during the last 6 months, we opened 34 new investigations and closed 21 investigations. And I'm going to talk about those as well. But we also, as part of our new program, helped precipitate in working with the county prosecutor's office $812,000 in tax payments, and we also work to expand our ethics and proactive ethics education, as well as issuing 58 ethics opinions. So let me talk a little bit about those. We continue to work and devote significant resources to working and cooperating with investigators in law enforcement. We are not a law enforcement entity, but we're sometimes asked to cooperate with those who do. And as you know, my office is required to close our own investigations once we believe that there is a reasonable belief of criminal conduct, then refer those matters over to appropriate law enforcement entities. And that makes sense for a lot of reasons, one of which is that because we are not criminal attorneys, there's a risk of taking evidence or investigating witnesses that might disclose the nature of the investigation or possibly create issues with regard to the admissibility of evidence down the road. So we close our investigation and coordinate and work with those. And as part of that, though, we closed investigations regarding former Regional Jail Director Mills, nepotism investigations with respect to management of the jail. But again, we continue to work with the different entities looking at that. One of the most important pieces from our office that occurred this year was the passage of the charter amendment, adding the Inspector General to the charter. And I want to express my appreciation for members of this committee who worked closely with that. I think it's an important statement about where the county is and how we care about independent oversight. And having taken that, I will tell you that it is I think more incumbent on me than ever to be responsive to taxpayers and the voters who voted this bit of confidence that my office needs to redouble our efforts to be an independent watchdog and to provide oversight. So as part of that, we try to be creative and think of new and different ideas on how we can be helpful. So one of our new initiatives that we started at the end of last year was to work with the county prosecutor's office and the county treasurer's office with respect to collection of tax payments. And as you may know, some of our collection efforts have now been shifted back to the prosecutor's office where it had been traditionally. And one of the things that we started to do was to identify kind of the low-hanging fruit and to issue letters of potential debarment for those entities who, if they owe the taxpayers money, we shouldn't be entering into contracts with them. So that has helped precipitate
$812,000 of these are mostly out-of-state corporations that, for whatever reason, were not being responsive to our county prosecutor's office. So that was just a trial program. I think that as we get better at it, I hope and look to think that that will expand significantly. But I really want to express my appreciation of the prosecutor's office and the treasurer's office for how we've been able to work together with respect to that. We also initiated a new program which we hope will be an annual program to provide free ethics continuing legal education credits for attorneys in Cuyahoga County. It's not a big deal, but it's an expenditure, and if we can do anything to save money and to make it easier, that's important. And so we worked with the Ohio Supreme Court's Office of Disciplinary Counsel to put on a program, and I think that saved our county attorneys some time. They don't have to go anywhere, and hopefully it saved us some money as well. As I mentioned, we increased our proactive ethics education, more ethics updates, but we also had a series of in-person interviews that covered almost 4,000 county employees. Let me talk a little bit about our compliance efforts and then talk about goals that we had for this period of time and what we have going forward. As you know, significant resources in my office also deal with what I consider to be important compliance pieces. But as part of that, we reviewed 2,106 driver's license abstracts to make sure that people who may be driving for the county do have valid Ohio driver's licenses. We reviewed 238 secondary employment and private business activity disclosures, 166 nepotism and conflict of interest submissions. We also initiated and reviewed background checks regarding 138 contractors, and we issued 58 ethics advisories and opinions. Last summer, when I spoke to you about what our goals are, I want to just kind of review those for what happened during this past period of time. The first was to assist and cooperate with law enforcement authorities. We do that. Some weeks it's a daily basis, and some weeks it goes for a few weeks without anything, but we continue to do that. This council helped create a full-time IT auditor and big data analyst position. So those individuals were hired at the end of this past year, starting in September. We welcomed Deputy Inspector General Cicely Woods, who came to us from the Alabama Supreme Court. And then we also welcomed Deputy Inspector General John Cornwell, who had been the IT director for Armstrong County in Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. We also intended to expand our proactive education program to reach out to municipal and government officials. That is something we did not achieve. Given the extra time with respect to some of these investigations and the other pieces that were on our plate in terms of deciding how to spend our resources, we decided that rather than reaching out to non-county entities, we would be much better off and more efficient and more respectful of taxpayer dollars if we continue to focus on taxpayer dollars here. And we've tried to do that. And let me just break for one moment. In terms of our budget, we closed the year $75,000 under budget, $75,656 under budget. That's about 7.8% less than had been budgeted for our office. So that's part of what we try to do, and we take that mandate seriously. But what we intend to do for the next 6 months, in the 6-month period that we're in now, is to continue to work with law enforcement entities. It's important to acquire full and unrestricted access to county documents. You know, one of the issues of the charter was that it clarified that my office has full and unrestricted access to county documents. And we've been engaged finally successfully with the IT department to make sure that that is in fact happening. And I can tell you that as of this morning, we now have what we believe to be access to the documents that we need. And so that's important because my office lives on information. If we can't have information, we can't do our job. So we're pleased to say that. But we're also going to expand our big data reviews of county data to look for ways that we can save money and find ways to kind of do more data reviews. And as you see, our ethics updates, we're going to start doing data updates as well, but then also using information to try to think about or to identify areas where we're not as efficient as we could be. So we expect that will be an important issue over the next 6 months. Then the fourth goal is to expedite our conflict of interest reviews for county travel requests and for county ethics questions in general. one of the things that happened in the last 6-month period of 2018 was a clarification that anyone who is seeking travel to be paid for by the county or by a third party needs to get a conflict of interest clearance from my office. And so that also resulted in a lot of additional work. And so we're going to try to create some standardized questionnaires to expedite that process, and generally try to create forms for our other ethics pieces as well. So whether it's a member of council or a member of executive, we want to turn around our ethics opinions to you more quickly, and I think we can do that with some standardized forms. So those are our goals for the next 6 months, and I'm here to talk about any issue that you have. This is an opportunity for me to talk about what our office does and to be responsive, and also to seek your guidance for how you believe my office should be working.
Any questions from our committee members up to this point? Yes, Councilman.
Is reaching out to the municipalities a goal for the next 6 months, or has that been put on hold for a while?
I think it's been put on hold for a while. We have had a lot of work on these other issues, and so one of the trade-offs is, do we want to focus on trying to get conflict of interest and ethics opinions turned around more quickly, or do we want to focus on these other pieces? So I hope to actually do some pieces. I mean, I think that my office should talk to the public generally about what our county is trying to do with respect to ethics, because I think that's an important piece. But I hesitated to put it on as a goal, given kind of what else is on the plate. So I guess my response to you is, right now it's a hope, but not a goal.
And looking now within the county, are there any ethical problems that you're aware of that remain prevalent and have not been resolved, or have the things that you're aware of been pretty much resolved?
Nothing ever gets resolved. So the answer to your question is yes. We are a growing and organic entity in which, much like hiring a police department doesn't eliminate crime, having ethics education doesn't eliminate ethical violations either. So it has to be a constant process of resolving issues. Some of the ones are obviously being reported in the news and are the subject of investigations by other entities. So there's that as well. I would say that we are in many ways, there are aspects in which we're trying to change the culture and get people to think about ethics issues. And so we're very happy when people respond to us on these pieces. And I'm just going to give you one anecdote of a lawyer who I met 3 weeks ago or so, who I've known for a number of years. And he came to me and he said, because he had been filing in the clerk of courts, he's like, what is going on with the office over there? Because, I used to always give them holiday presents, and now they're refusing. What is wrong with, I can't give people these gifts anymore. And so, and I said, yeah, well, that's kind of what we're trying to do. And so we see these improvements in some areas, but then in reference to the start of your question, there are clearly areas where we are continuing to fail. And so, there is, at one level, I think there's an increased awareness, and at another level, we continue to be and will always be imperfect.
Okay.
Thank you. A question on the item number 2, the full and unrestricted access. How long have you been working with the Department of Information Technology before this morning getting a green light that they are going to be more accessible?
So it's been an ongoing issue, and this really goes back to the budget hearings from, I guess, a year and a half, nearly 2 years ago, where I think council in particular was concerned about the speed and accuracy of data coming from the IT department, and not just to my office, but to the internal audit department as well, and approved a position to be shared jointly between internal audit and the Inspector General's office for someone with IT. And at that time, there was pushback from people in the IT department that they didn't want that to occur. Council approved it. And then after that budget was passed in January, Corey Swaysgood and I met with then Chief of Staff Sharon Sobel Jordan and then Director of Information Technology Scott Rourke. And Ms. Sobel Jordan made it very clear that IT was supposed to provide this access, and she expected it to happen. Shortly thereafter, there was a change in the administrative structure at IT, or at least that there was a temporary or who knows how long administrative leave. So then we went and reconnected with Chief of Staff Earl Lykin. He also approved that commitment, and yet we didn't get any extra access. And at that time, we had not yet hired John Cornwell from Armstrong County, and so we sort of put it on hold, but we continued to talk to them. So when Mr. Cornwell came on board in October, we then re-engaged with IT again, and again, we were somewhat frustrated with the ability to get that. And so he performed he did a census of the information systems which internal audit and the IG needed to get access to, and we requested access to those systems. And we went several weeks with nothing happening whatsoever. We then met with interim Chief of Staff Matt Carroll, who also instructed that it be done. Still didn't happen. Met with Joe Nani to keep council in the loop. And then we finally said, look, we need to have a meeting with the county executive. The county executive ordered that it be done, and we set March 11th as a deadline. And March 11th came and passed, and that wasn't done. And then finally we reconnected again, and now finally it has occurred. But it's been an ongoing process, and it's been something that's taken significantly more time than I would have liked.
Was there, if I may ask, were there reasons given along the way, or was it just silence, or what is it that they were not cooperating with, besides the facts that you weren't getting the information you wanted?
So first they didn't really give a reason, and they just sort of nodded, and there was no response. In the most recent meeting with interim Chief of Staff Matt Carroll, we were told, well, we don't believe that giving Mr. Cornwell, who was the IT director for Armstrong County, access to this information is a good security system. We think it's a security risk, and we really don't want to do it. So that was the first time that there was really a reason provided. Instead, we just didn't get an answer, and it just wasn't being done. And I don't know whether that was intentional foot dragging or not intentional, but it was the case. But eventually, the reality is that rules are always inconvenient. The charter's requirement that my office have full and unrestricted access is inconvenient. We appreciate that, but we all have to follow the rules. And so, I am happy to report that I think we're finally at that place. But that is my understanding.
So as of this morning, you feel that you're in a good place. Does that good place, you believe, very, very credible, that you have no reason to think that you will be able, the next time we meet, perhaps in 2 weeks, we come back and ask you this question again, you will say, yes, between now and then, things have been disclosed and I'm comfortable with what I received?
At this time, I have no reason to believe that there's any access that is being denied or restricted inappropriately.
Okay, good. Thank you. We will ask again in 2 weeks. Yes.
I have a question to the IG. Do you have access to all the county emails?
I am told that we do.
So could there be possibility of violating any HIPAA or attorney-client privilege by the IG's office infiltrating our county employees' emails?
So let me address that directly, which is our process will be to set up a screening team, and one of our employees also works part-time at Metro Health, and she's familiar with the HIPAA rules. And so we actually, since we just got it this morning, have not done anything new that we had before. But our process is going to be for her to screen out everything that might be HIPAA related. And we actually, last week, in anticipation that we would get this, reviewed possible HIPAA training sessions. And we have a set of HIPAA rules with regard to that. And so we're going to do the same thing with respect to attorney-client privilege documents as well. So there will be in that case, it'll be a lawyer or someone else who will look at it for that piece.
So if I can, how would that work? So you have a screening team that can only screen something after they've grabbed it in violation of something.
Well, so currently IT has that right now, right? And so what happened before was that if we would ask IT for, hey, give us this set of emails, they would just hand it over and there would be no screen. The only difference between what we had before and what we have now in terms of process is that we can get the information directly, except the other difference that will occur is that we're going to set up a screening process. And this is similar to what prosecutors' offices do as well, where they have, they call it a dirty team and a clean team, or sometimes they call it a taint team or not. And so we've had issues like that in the past where when we are interviewing someone, we're required to give what are called Garrity Warnings. If we believe that that it could lead to a criminal investigation, we're sort of, we try to avoid anything that's criminal, but we recognize that sometimes something may lead to that. So in that case, if during the course of an investigation, anything comes up that may be criminal, that person then has to not disclose the information. So he becomes the I hate to use the term dirty team, but that's sort of the piece to it. So it's something that we've already been doing with respect to testimony or witness statements, and it's something that we're now going to extend to documents as well.
Good, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go right ahead, Councilman Miller.
How many companies are currently on debarment, and how many of those are expected to go off debarment within the next 6 months?
I asked my staff to make sure that we have debarment numbers because Councilman Miller is interested. And so, as we were pulling these together, in the second half of 2018, 28 companies came off of the debarment list. And most of these debarments deal with debarments as a result of Department of Development loan pieces. Not all of them, but a significant majority of them. In the first half, another 9 will end. And actually 2 of those have already ended because they ended in January of 2019, and another 7 will come off. So during this current 6-month period, another 9 will come off. There will be 15 remaining on the list, assuming that there aren't more going forward. And we may well add some of those as part of our tax collection support process. So, but we anticipate there will be 15 remaining on the list. There are currently 0 suspensions.
And do we have any currently pending debarment cases?
We do not at this time. And I'm looking back at my staff, correct? We don't have any, I'm not aware of any. No, okay.
All right, and before we leave your goals, and given you've listed the big data as one of your goals, just briefly, what would you say, given the money that was expended for the big data person that is now part of your team, what is probably the most important big data update that you'll be bringing us that you're targeting? What would you say you're going to put your person on?
Well, so because we didn't have access yet, we had her actually, and because she's from the Alabama Supreme Court and had experience with respect to juvenile courts there, she spent a lot of time on the jail issues. So some of that will come out of there, but then we're going to talk with the auditor about, where, if you look at where we spend the most money, certainly salaries and benefits are number one. So I think that we will take a look at that, make sure that, or try to review that to see if there is low-hanging fruit. But then I think also we're going to start looking at the contracting process as well, and see where there are areas there that we can target.
Just for my own, I think contracting processes would be a good place to really take a good look at.
And Madam Chair, I would like to say, and I appreciate this because I want to hear from you about, where you think that the low-hanging fruit is, and also how you think that my office should be run. So I just want to say thank you for any of that guidance. And I'd say to everyone here, regardless of whether I'm here at the podium and the microphone, I'm very interested in meeting with any of you to talk about kind of what we could do better in my own office.
Okay, look forward to hearing more about that.
So,
Are you, any other
Madam Chair,
questions? Oh, go right ahead.
I think Sonny was first. I'll let-
Mr. IG, how did you get authorization to access all these emails? Did I miss that? I mean,
So the county charter says that I'm entitled to complete and unrestricted access to all county documents. And so emails are, of course, documents. And actually, we've always had, the ability to get those by simply putting a request into the IT department.
so do the employees know? I mean, this is all just county employees, or these agencies in which we do business? How far does this extend
So-
into your ability to access
Yeah,
this?
so of course, all email is public record and county record unless it's privileged with a particular piece. And so I believe at the moment, IT is working on limiting it to those within the county executive agency and not extending it to independent agencies. But I think, and this is sort of a technical question, I believe at this moment, Mr. Cornwell could have access to these other pieces. But I just want to make it clear that we have no interest or desire to go beyond our jurisdiction on those things. I would tell every county employee, though, which is that you should assume that your county email account is a public record, because I think it is.
Did we notify employees? I mean, they shouldn't be, it's part of our handbook anyway.
it's part of our
onboarding.
onboarding.
That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of at least the culture we're trying to create, that everything needs to be county related.
Yeah.
But maybe since this is something new, even though IT's always been able to do it, I don't know. I think we should send something out, just
Okay.
a reminder, just like you did the other day with asking asking
tasks.
county employees to do personal tasks. That was a really good reminder, and shocking to see what goes on. Maybe something like that.
Or even during the holiday.
We can do that.
about
Absolutely.
gifts. And, yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's a good idea.
If Delante is watching on video, let's get an ethics update out about email.
How does that transfer over to texting? Is that also, if
I'm not aware that we have any access to texting. That was
though
not
it-
one of the systems that we requested access to.
okay. All right.
Madam Chair, we used to have county phones. When we
Yes.
first got here, we were delivered each a phone, and at that point, we would have been, our text would have been open, I would think.
Well, and my belief on that is that if you're using a county phone, that's probably a public record, and it probably could be accessible. To my knowledge, my office has never had and does not currently have access to texts of any
Which
kind.
would be private cell phones.
Certainly if they're private.
But they may be county business. I mean, you don't know really what's said over text.
Yeah, and I have not had access, and it's not something I think that we'll request.
Just checking.
Sure.
All right, you may continue. Or did you have a question?
yeah.
Councilman Miller? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Could you describe what a big data investigation might look like? What would you access and for what purpose?
Sure. And actually, I was just informed by my staff that we have initiated debarments this year. So we have, with respect to cooperating with the prosecutor's office, we have sent out initial letters of potential debarment for 32 taxpayers, corporations. So I stand corrected, and I appreciate that. In terms of a big data request, we would do a couple things. So we share with internal audit access to a program called IDEA that looks for anomalies in payments. So one thing to do would be to look at all of the invoices that we have paid and to look for recurring round numbers. So often if there's a recurring round number, that can be a flag that needs to be looked at in terms of fraud. We can also do things like match invoices for contractors with employee addresses or that sort of thing, because an employee should not be having a separate contract or separate check mailed to that person. So those are the sorts of ways that we can put two pieces of data together. Another thing that happens is you look for either duplicate invoice numbers or missing invoice numbers. So those are all areas where those can be red flags that there might be something wrong or improper that's going on. So that's one set of things. Another would be to measure, where has growth accelerated in terms of our expenditures unreasonably, and to look at that as well.
Getting back for a moment to emails. Would emails that are sent from a county computer but sent on a private account be accessed to only county accounts?
I'm not sure so if you're using your private Gmail account, I don't believe that I believe that the IT department has access to that. I don't believe that what we have gotten, which is access to Office 365, would sweep that in or include that.
Okay. Go ahead and continue.
So that's all I
So,
have at this
okay.
time.
All right.
I
Very
just
good
want to say
then.
thank you.
All right, well, let me just flip through here. I know you mentioned the economic development in your report, and things are moving along well. You gave it a good report that you're satisfied with its progress and taking many of the suggestions they have initiated and put in place, and we have people there now that are doing a good job. I don't think, though, per your report, and I think it's on page 24, that we are completely finished, that you mentioned your disappointment in not having closure on some of these files, and also the loan investigations that they were involved in. We still do not have a hard date as to when that would be ending, and we could finally put an end to years ago. So can you give us an update there?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. And I think that you accurately described sort of the nuanced nature of the report, which is to start by saying the individuals who are involved today are doing the best job that they can. I think that the people who are in charge are really trying to get things done. Having said that, I do think that there are some things that I want to point out to council. One is they had indicated that they believed that all of the remaining loans would be reconciled or evaluated by the end of March. And yet, if you look at kind of the progress that occurred previously, they really only, at the end of June, 187 had been reconciled, and then they went to 196. So that's only an increase of 9. And the reason is not that they're not working hard, but that some of these files are simply missing documents. And so I think that I admire DOD's optimism that they think they can get all of these done. I would just tell you as an independent oversight, I am very skeptical that's going to happen. My understanding is that the part-time person they've hired, that's accelerating things. But there are just going to be some files that will never be reconciled. And so as much as I like their optimism and their can-do spirit, I have to tell you as an independent evaluator, I don't think that's going to happen. Let me also talk about a second issue that you raised, and that is the importance of being able to have a hard close on our accounts. One of the things that we've been recommending for over a year is that every one of these accounts have a hard close, and a hard close means that you can't go back and change the data. Because if you can change old data, you can create fraud. It's a fraud risk. It's a real problem. And what we have been told is they can't institute a hard close until they get essentially everything reconciled, because that will lose or destroy data. And I would point that out as an ongoing risk, not because I think anything is going on, but because I think it is a risk that we need to resolve. I am pleased with the efforts and the desire and the openness of DoD. I think they're being overly optimistic about their ability to fix everything, and we really need to get a hard close.
How can we understand their issue with the hard close? I mean, they have come back with an answer to say that they cannot give a hard close because of the reasons you stated. So how can we, is there a compromise? I mean, how can we get to a point where we are satisfied, or they are satisfied, that what it is that they're being asked of has been addressed? It seems like an impasse to me.
Well, I think it's an issue of diminishing returns on what they're trying to protect. And I think that collectively or individually, whether it's the Department of Development or this body or the executive, needs to kind of set a deadline and say, look, at this point, we're not finding this extra information, so let's start the hard close. We understand that we're going to lose some data going forward, but that we need to do it if we're going to use this system for all of our future loans, we need to have confidence and security in it. And so, whether that deadline is June 30 of this year or September 30 or December 31, I think we just need to say the extra effort that we're putting in, we're not getting as much, and so we just need to do it at some point. That would be my recommendation.
All right, and as far as the older loans that seem to be difficult in meeting those deadlines, again, is there a compromise to researching what files are still doable? There must be some in their mind that they can still hopefully get their arms around, and then there's others that are just so loose and missing that they can't possibly. Is there some type of investigation that can go on as to what is,
And they are investigating to the extent that means researching. I mean, they are shaking they're taking up every sofa cushion in the county to find the extra change and to find the extra documents. And I know that they've reached out to the borrowers as well for those documents. But again, I think at some point it's going to get to the point where we just need to say, okay, this is the best data we're going to get, and there's no point in spending $50,000 to chase $40,000.
right?
And I think they just need to do it, and that lets them turn over a new leaf and start afresh. And I think that's the way to go.
Okay, that's good to know. We certainly can raise that awareness when we talk to those directors in other committees. Lastly, the only concern I had was, and I brought this up before, is the license suspensions.
Yep.
And I think you had, how many?
So we had, I'm going to try to count this correctly.
And I do set that aside from those that have expired or for whatever reason lapsed. Those are a little different issues, but those that actually have been suspended usually is a pretty good reason why they've been suspended. And how many did you have of those?
So we had 22. And actually I include within that 4 expired, so I apologize for
Okay.
mixing those numbers. So we had 4 that were during a period of suspension. So that suspension period rolled over during our 6-month cutoff. 9 that were newly suspended during that period of time. 5 that had been a period of expiration, 4 that were expired. So we're really looking at about 13 that were under suspension or which became suspended during the course of the last 6 months. So in terms of looking at the split out, the Clerk of Court's office had 2 of those, Consumer Affairs 1, DCFS had 7, EFS 4, Medical Examiner's Office 1, PRC 1, Public Works 1, Sheriff 3. And so what we did for each of these was to ask the directors to review whether that person, just because their license was suspended doesn't mean that they were driving on county time.
Right.
But we wanted the managers to be aware and to go back and check to make sure the county wasn't put at risk. And with respect to the ordinance that we are discussing, they're not required to get back to us. So we asked for feedback, and to date we haven't gotten any. And so, I would say it would be helpful to us to have the extra support of the ordinance to clarify that executive branch agencies should respond with this sort of information. So,
Right, I would say that it was appropriate to go back to the directors. It's their job to make sure that these suspensions are taken care of. But I also think as a follow-up, we should know that they were. And having county employees with the potential of getting into a county vehicle or their own vehicle on county business with a suspended license could slip through the cracks. And given that you're investigating, we should have an answer to,
agree.
yes, in fact, it was taken care of.
And Madam Chair, I think that this is an appropriate concern because these are not big numbers and yet they could have big risks. So, 9 employees out of the workforce that we have is not a great amount. And yet, 1 death or 1 traffic fatality could be an issue. And so, to the extent that we can do this with relatively little expenditure of our own resources,
Right.
we're in favor of that.
Okay, well, good. Is there any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your report. We look forward to hearing from you again. And perhaps in 2 weeks, we will all be back and have some legislation that is, we dotted our i's and crossed our t's and feel good about passing.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair. Thank you, council members.
If there's no other business, we are adjourned. Thanks for coming, Son.